12 years ago, I left my dream job. I walked away from a great salary, good pension and job security, and I started my own business. Did I make a mistake? In this video, I'm going to share my story about going from employment to self-employment. I'm going to tell you the good stuff, the bad stuff, and everything in between. Let's go for a walk. So I started work back in the 90s as an apprentice accountant, and I worked at a Renault motor dealership. And for 3 years I went to college on day release and I worked my way through my AAT qualification. From there onwards I moved over to electronics component distribution, which is as exciting as it sounds. But there's where I did my professional exams. So I worked my way through what's called my CIMA qualification. That's the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants. And again, for about 5 years I worked for this company, again building up my skills, learning my trade, getting my qualifications. From there I moved on to food manufacturing, which is where I spent most of my career. And I worked through my management development program. And at that time I then moved on to starting to look after my own manufacturing sites, running the finance department of my own sites. And then as my career developed, I finally moved to what I thought was my dream job. I moved to be the senior factory finance manager for a large manufacturing company. I was responsible for a budget, something like £100 million budget, large team. Obviously that came with a good salary, great pension, good benefits, job security, and for all intents and purposes I'd made it. That's what I'd worked my entire career towards, and I finally got there. So along with the job came a hour and 20-minute commute each way. It's like 2 hours and 40 minutes per day travelling. Along with that came long hours on site, and then when I'd get home of an evening I'd have to do emails, maybe have a few calls, and it was the same at the weekend. And at the time I had a young family. My son had just started school, my daughter was a babby, and I just wasn't seeing very much of those. I also found the job incredibly stressful. Like, no matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't really get recognised for what we were doing. It was highly competitive. There were lots of people there all trying to impress and things like that. And it just got a little bit silly, really. I think the other thing, if I'm honest now, is I was actually lying to myself, because I'd worked so hard and so long to get to where I wanted to go. I thought I was telling myself that this was what I wanted, and deep down it wasn't. And I didn't really have anyone to speak to, because there wasn't really many people who were going through the same sort of thing. So like, I remember speaking to my mum and dad and saying, you know, how stressed I was, and they'd sort of shrug and say, well, it's tough at the top, son, which of course it is, but doesn't really help anything. And then no one at work would admit how they felt either. So it was quite a lonely existence. And the amount of pressure I felt, because, you know, 2 kids, married, house, mortgage, all of those things. And I don't know, it was really tough. So after about 3 years, it all came to a head. There's a saying that the truth will out, and it definitely did. So basically, after 3 years of this constant misalignment, like where you're not aligned with what you actually want in life, but you're carrying on anyway, it sounds quite dramatic. But after 3 years of this, I made myself ill. And I ended up having to take time from work for a couple of months and deal with my mental health. And that was really tough, because you felt shame and you felt guilt and embarrassed. You felt like you'd let everybody down. You felt like you weren't providing for your family. Felt like a failure. All of those things. It was awful. But thankfully we got through it. My wife supported me. My family supported me. So to cut a long story short, this is also not a sob story, because it's just a fact. It's a fact of the matter. This is what happened. So eventually I made the decision I wasn't going to go back, and I left. And I decided at that point I was going to start my own business. So the first thing I will say about being in business or having a business is it's not an easy life. And anyone who says it is an easy life, well, it's not true. It's hard. It's hard in a different way though. So things to consider when you have your own business. You have no minimum wage. You could earn nothing. You could make a loss. You have no sick pay. You have no holiday pay. You have no company pension. And when you go self-employed, you'll find that you've got quite a few skills that you need to pick up that you don't have. So for me, background in finance, background in accountancy, I knew my numbers and I knew finances and I knew how to run a business from a financial point of view, but I had no idea about marketing. I had no idea about sales and all things like that. And you've got to learn that pretty darn quick, and you sort of learn it on the job. But on the flip side, what is great about being self-employed or owning your own business is the sense of freedom you have. Because now things are up to you. And you can set the tone and you can set the way things are going to be for your business. So, first things you can choose. You choose who you work with. You don't have to work with everyone, and you should not work with everyone. What you really need to do is think about the people that you like to work with, who you can add most value to, and position yourself to work with them. You decide what hours you work, you decide when you work. If you want to do 20 hours a week, you do 20 hours a week. If you want to do 80, you do 80. It's up to you. You build the life you want. And don't get me wrong, you're going to have to work quite hard, especially in the early days when you're building up your reputation, gaining your client base, things like that. But ultimately, you build it the way you want to do. For me, I don't want to work every hour of every day. I want to do lots of different things. I like what I do, I enjoy it, but I don't want to do it all the time. So, as well as there being no minimum wage that you can earn, there's no maximum. What you earn, generally speaking, is the results of your efforts. So again, you automatically get that feedback about what difference you're going to make. So if you've had a good week or a bad week or a bad year or a good year or whatever, that's on you. So there's no argument. You did that. It's building something of my own, from scratch, from nothing, building it to where it is. If you have a team, you build that team. And again, you set the tone and the culture of how things work. So I suppose another question is, do I earn what I earned back in the corporate world? And the answer, frankly, to start with is no, not at all. For a while you earn significantly less, but you've got to give it time and patience. Over time you can replace that income. I think there's lots of other things to consider that are not financial. So the way you can help people, whatever your business is, whatever service or product you provide, is actually providing a solution to somebody's problem. It meets a need. If it didn't meet a need, you wouldn't be able to sell it. And you can take pride in meeting that need. You can make this uniquely you, and I suggest you do. Lean into yourself, your personality. I'm not telling you to go and pack your job in, and I'm not putting employment or the corporate world down, because I know a lot of people who are working in the corporate world, they're very happy. All I'm sort of saying is, if you're not happy, you don't have to just keep plodding your way through it. There are other things you could do. For me, having my own business, being self-employed, that works for me. I love it. I'm living proof that you can move from employment into self-employment. So that's my story. If you've watched this far, thanks. I'd really like it if you could give me a like, or perhaps subscribe, or leave me a comment. If you've gone self-employed, if you've started a business, or if you're thinking of doing so, just let me know. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.